Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to r/ProRevenge, where you'll hear stories about people getting what they deserve. My friends, I hope you're having an awesome day today, and in this episode, there's going to be two stories of revenge. The first is a pretty long story, and one that I really enjoyed. A US military soldier learns a valuable lesson on why you should always keep your hands to yourself. And the second story, OP's wife gets a good revenge on an employer who makes fun of her application for a job. Guys, I hope you stay for the stories today and do hit that subscribe button for future revenge tales. If you guys like this kind of stuff, let's dive in. I was working as a civilian with the US military overseas, and I lived off base in an apartment complex popular among the US military. One morning, I accidentally hit another soldier's vehicle. Upon exiting the vehicle, I noticed that both of our cars were what you would call a hoopty. A hoopty is an old car that's pretty beat up, that's been passed around from service to service member, and they generally sell for $1,000 to $2,000. I also recognized that I was at fault for the accident. It was a very minor accident. His rear bumper was dented in slightly. I approached the driver who had already gotten out, and he was in uniform, and I apologized and said if it was alright with him, I'd like to negotiate a payment. I told him I'll pay him cash, and we don't involve the authorities. I wanted to keep this simple. I'll be honest, the accident was so minor that I honestly expected him to say, "Nah man, it's good." But even if he wanted some money, I'd have paid him. I've always been of the opinion that if you have a fender bender, you can negotiate agreeable terms between both the parties, and it's best not to involve the insurance or the police. He told me he wanted to call the police. I said we could call the police, or we could go on base together, and I could give him $300. He said that wasn't enough, so I upped my offer to $500. He then, out of nowhere, proceeded to punch me in the face, square in the eye. It was a sucker punch, and then he got into his car and took off in the process, and nearly ran me over. Now, I had a black box in my car which recorded everything. I went to the Provost Marshal office on base, which is like a police station, and reported the accident and the assault, and showed the MP the footage. They used his license plate to track him down. I was also asked if I wanted to involve the local authorities or press charges off base. Honestly, I felt like the soldier would learn his lesson if I let the military court handle this, and I said, not at this time. The end result was the soldier in question got 60 days of extra duty, reduction in rank, and forfeited a portion of his paycheck. Essentially, if he dealt with that, this would have been the end of the whole ordeal, and honestly, at this point, I assumed our little ordeal was over. Well, a few days after his punishment was decided on, which was not long after the incident itself, I was in the commissary, which is a grocery store on base, shopping, when the soldier who assaulted me saw me and began to insult me. I told him he needed to calm down, that he should learn his lesson, and he told me that I was a pussy who didn't know how to take a punch. I reminded him that I held back on destroying his life, and he told me he's already been punished and I can't touch him again. A store employee witnessed the entire encounter, and I got the employee detail and reported this interaction to his command. His commander told me that he had been ordered to not interact with me and would take action. His commander also recommended me that I involve the local authorities, since this soldier obviously isn't learning his lesson. So I did. I contacted an attorney. The attorney was unsure if we could successfully sue the soldier, and he said he'd need a cash payment to take the case. Honestly, I was mad, and I wanted to teach the guy a lesson, so I agreed, and it was not cheap. So, to keep the story short, we ended up in court off base. We presented our evidence. The soldier in question had decided to represent himself. The judge ended up granting me a judgment of approximately $50,000 US. When the judgment was given, the soldier cursed at the judge and told him that the army would cover for him. So the judge changed his judgment to $80,000 and then proceeded to ask me if I wanted to press charges against the soldier in criminal court. Honestly, it was obvious this guy wasn't going to learn a lesson, so I told the judge that I wanted to pursue criminal charges in addition to the judgment. My lawyer later advised me that if I ever wanted to see the money, that I should pursue an international hold. An international hold is basically where the soldier would not be allowed to leave the country until I was paid my $80,000. Also, he told me that according to the agreement between the US military and the host country, the US military would honor the international hold. Basically, the US military would not protect him or move him out of country to avoid punishment. And by this point, I had paid my lawyer thousands of dollars, and I honestly didn't feel like paying thousands of dollars and getting nothing for it. So I said yes, I wanted to go forward with the hold. About a month later, the international hold was granted, and the US military was informed of this. 2 months after that, the criminal case was over, and the soldier was sentenced to 90 days in jail. By this point, the soldier had been moved onto the base, into his barracks, by his commander. I remember the day I was informed the MPs handed him over to the local authorities to begin his 90-day jail sentence. Did I mention that he still owed me $80,000? I had heard nothing for a year, and then one day, I get a call from his commander. His commander wants me to make a statement in regards to the case. I go in and make the statement. During the statement, I find out that the US military was in process of chaptering the soldier out of the US military. The commander also informed me that he was close to coming up with the money to pay me so he could have the international hold lifted. The commander also asked me if my lawyer would be willing to make a statement. I contacted my lawyer, who also made a statement about the facts of the case. A few weeks later, his ex-wife contacted me. When this all started, I knew he was married, and I guess his wife decided to divorce him. She told me her ex-husband had the money and needed the details on how to pay me. I provided her the details, and a few days later, I got the payment and contacted his ex-wife to inform her that I'd been paid. She then asked me to send a receipt so he could have the international hold lifted and return to the States. I asked her how he got the money, and she said that he maxed out his credit and also had his family help him out. Also, during this conversation, I found out that the army had chaptered him out of the military, and that's the last I heard from his side. I bet the soldier regrets not taking the cash settlement for the fender bender now. Oh, I'm so sorry for hitting your car. I can pay you $500 for the damages. No, that's not good enough. What else you got? Well, you can punch me in the face, lose your career, go $80,000 in debt and face some jail time. You know what? I'll take that instead. So, since the post exploded on Reddit, OP has come back to address some questions in an edit. Am I worried about the guy getting revenge on me? No, he's back in the States and I'm still overseas. He most likely has a criminal record, which means he won't even be allowed past immigration. Plus, since then I've taken a new job, moved, etc. And this happened many years ago. The cash amount seems high. The actual amount was in a foreign currency, and I rounded up and adjusted the figures, but it was very high. I did suffer from a black eye, and his behavior after the fact didn't help. Also, this incident happened in Asia, during a time period in which we had several other high-profile incidents with US service members screwing up. Honestly, I expected around $15,000 to $20,000. Also in this country, settlements for damages are based upon your ability to pay and tend to be on the higher side. I think the court also thought that he was an American and could afford it. However, the amount even shocked my lawyer. What country did this happen in? I don't wish to disclose that. However, several people in the comment section have guessed correctly, and someone who was familiar with the incident PM'd me, so this blew up more than I intended. I will say this, it happened in Asia, in a country with a large troop presence. Why did I go so far? Honestly, that was never my intention. In fact, I decided to report to the military instead of going straight to the local authorities because I figured doing so would allow us to deal with the issue and punishment would be limited. I was right, he didn't learn his lesson. However, once I got the local authorities and my lawyer involved, it turned into something I didn't expect. Why did he get a jail sentence for a simple assault? So, in this country, they do not like to give suspended sentences to foreigners. I suspected a local national would have gotten a suspended sentence. I do have a national friend who was involved in an assault many years ago, and he got a 90-day suspended sentence. However, my guess is the judge gave him jail time instead of a suspended sentence because he was a foreigner. My wife and I moved to our current city back in 2013. The standards for my wife's job here are different than the standard back home. She has an associate's degree, and most employers wanted a bachelor's degree. However, nothing could stop her and she kept putting in applications. One day, one of the employers she had sent applications to called her back. However, it was not to tell her that she had gotten the job. Instead, it was the manager telling her how unprofessional it was of her to apply for positions that were obviously above her. In fact, they went as far as to say, "I am going to delete your email from our system. Please don't apply anymore, it's just a waste of our time." I'll send you a letter, since you can't seem to follow directions in my emails. My wife, after she got over the initial shock, asked the manager for her name. The manager said, I don't see why it matters, but Ivanka Tulip. My wife said thank you and continued her job hunt. Sure enough, she got the letter in the mail asking her not to apply anymore, citing inability to follow clear directions. My wife decided to take a picture of the letter because it was so ridiculous. Eventually, my wife landed a job at one of the biggest employers in the city. Not only this, but this employer was the main supply of business to the employer that was so rude to my wife. Well, my wife is an extremely precocious and hardworking person, and eventually got her bachelor's and then became the manager over her crew. One of the manager's responsibilities was to decide who to send business to. My wife told her boss about the letter and what happened, and used that as justification that if this is how a business treats potential hires, then they really shouldn't be trusted with their business. They stopped dealing with them, and wouldn't you know it, the rude employer's business went way down. In fact, my wife would only give them business if they were the last ones who could be called. This led to the most awesome meeting my wife has had this year. You see, to improve relations, the crappy employer set up a meeting with my wife and my wife's boss to show how much value they could add. The day of the meeting comes and everyone introduces themselves. Finally, Mrs. Tulip says that she's the manager and how nice it was to meet everyone. That's when my wife said, "Excuse me, I just want to be certain, are you Miss Ivanka Tulip?" Ivanka says, "Yes, that's me." My wife replies, "Oh, excellent, I'm so happy to finally meet you in person." Thinking she had an in with my wife, Mrs. Tulip was over the moon. My wife let them carry on and tell her all about how much value they could add to the business, and how they could really help out my wife's employer. This is when my wife says, "Well, thank you, but unfortunately, I feel we can't really give business to an employer who we feel has some ethical issues that need to be addressed." Ivanka is dumbfounded and says, "Excuse me? We were not made aware of any ethical issues. What are you talking about?" This is when my wife brought out the letter that was signed by Mrs. Tulip. My wife then tells them that if they treat potential hires this way, then it would be very hard for my wife to give them business and denied any future business with them. Mrs. Tulip turned white, and you could hear a pin drop on the other side of the table. My wife thanked them for their time, but apologized and went back to her work. We don't know if anything happened to Mrs. Tulip, but that business has since downsized and has gotten a reputation for being a poor choice to send business. This story is absolutely absurd. Who the heck sends out a letter like that to unqualified applicants? The manager totally deserved to lose her job right then and there for doing that piece of crap move. My friends, and that brings us to another end of our /ProRevenge. I hope you got your dose of satisfaction today. And if you guys missed the last episode, an entitled Karen threatens to call the cops on OP because he takes down a swing set in his backyard. Oh, what will her kids play on now? If you haven't seen the video, check it out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.